Hey guys, this is my third and last video talking about 10.1 and mages, and this is the one that's going to be focusing on Frost. I'm not necessarily the Frost connoisseur, but I have played this spec a few times and I've been playing it more very recently. And obviously, I've been playing this game for a very long time and Mage main for a very long time, so I do have some valid opinions, I feel like. But yeah, here are my thoughts about Frost in general. Frost is actually very powerful right now on single target. With the new rotation especially, kind of it's kind of stupid how strong it is, if I'm going to be honest with you. Its single target is like absurd. Blizzard, if you're watching this, please don't nerf this spec. I mean, no, you should obviously if it's broken, but it's really strong. Uh, and it has actually pretty decent niches in that its two target is very strong, its single target is good. It's quite mobile. It has consistent damage. A lot of great things are going for Frost, but there are a few things that could make the spec even better. That could make it enjoyable and fun when it's not just broken, right? We shouldn't rely on a spec's like fun ability to be based off of when it's broken. So here are my thoughts on like what I think are the main issues and where to fix those. So in general in the Frost tree, I think there are a lot of things that are basically borderline mandatory for the spec right now for how it plays, and just in general with how the spec functions, the talents are just way too powerful. And though that doesn't mean that they should be nerfed, what I'm trying to get at instead is at the fact that they should actually be combined or baked into like baseline. Um, because the issue right now is that we have a lot of these points that exist, like piercing cold, bone chilling, flash freeze, splintering cold, splitting ice, hailstones. Like literally every single one of these points here, shatter, like as well. Like all these points are basically just passive. You don't interact with them at any point. You don't think about them at any point, and you kind of just talent into them because they are good. And you might say, well, that's like quite common, right, for a lot of specs that exists. While that's true, the problem for specifically for the Frost tree is that these mandatory talents essentially remove the flexibility when there are so many of them. So on a small level, like quote unquote rework, or a small level like improvement to the spec, perhaps combining one or two of these together, or making one or two of these baseline is just like, frees up one or two points to put into other places. Um, Alternatively, buffing some of the other weaker talents and like creating more build diversity is actually also like quite attractive. Um, if we look at some of these points, if we start off at the top of the tree here, my first complaint is Blizzard should not be here because this forces you to take it in every single situation ever. I think a very easy fix is to literally just swap Blizzard and Brain Freeze. That's it. You take both of them right now. This point is not forced, this point is forced, but it seems to me that Brain Freeze is more required of Frost than Blizzard is. There is technically a gameplay talent build right now on 4 targets or on Primal Council. It doesn't run Brain Freeze, which is a little weird in my opinion, but I understand why. But nonetheless, I think that's more of a niche situation because even in M Plus you play Brain Freeze. So yeah, definitely think about swapping these two around. Just frees up more talent points because Blizzard on single target, very cringe. Other things are, I really dislike the idea that summon water elemental is never taken, even though it's a little, a lot of people don't like it. I understand why. Pet AI is weird. It is a bit odd to have a choice node that is virtually not a choice node. You could literally delete summon elemental overnight, and like 95% of players wouldn't even notice it. And that just seems a little odd to me for a choice node, because choice nodes should be exciting. They should be a conscious choice that you make. So I think something to rework Water Elemental a little bit. I think what could be cool is if Water Elemental played more into your AoE playstyle instead, since Lonely Winter focuses on single target, right? I think having it focus on a little bit more like Blizzard gameplay, a little bit more, other things gameplay, Frozen Orb, whatever, could be quite intriguing. But it might potentially be a little weird just because it tends to be that this side is the side that focuses more on AoE and this side focuses on single target. But if that's the case, what role does Summon Water Elemental do or have? It just seems like an alternative to, oh, instead of my damage being mine, it's my pet's damage. But then it just becomes a numbers game, and that just feels weird for a choice node. Why is a choice node a numbers game? You know what I mean? Like a choice node should be an actual choice that you make for a scenario. Uh, like a single target, 2 targets, 3 targets. whatever, mobility, non-mobility, two different kinds. Not just, oh, this number seems higher than this number. So I think definitely something to look at is Water Elemental, because I actually think that he has some cool potential. Like he has that ability that guarantees a Fingers of Frost or a Flurry proc, whatever it is. I think there could be more room for that. That could be fascinating. So I do wish that was possible. Another big grievance I have is with Glacial Spike. Right now, this talent is just not viable. And even though I actually really like this ability, and I've been trying to make it viable for a long time actually, but unfortunately it's just not there. A big part of this is how it interacts with the rest of our kit. We have all these talents that buff Frostbolt, but none of them work with Glacial Spike, which seems a little odd. Because why would you cast 3 seconds of Glacial Spike, which is a cost opportunity, right? There's an opportunity cost, sorry, whatever you want to call it. You're spending time doing something that you don't want to be doing because it's taking away time from stuff you want to be doing. So the cast time is quite problematic here. So there's two approaches to this, I think. First, reduce the cast time, so it's less punishing. That seems like the most obvious choice. Second is to buff the spell power baseline, because how Glacial Spike works is it has X plus 5 icicles. The 5 icicles is based off your mastery, obviously, and then X is just a number, right? So it's 310 spell power right now, or 311 if you want to round. They could buff that number as well, just makes it a bit more attractive. Could be interesting. But I think even if both those situations were to come to play, I think it just still feels a bit unsynergistic with our kit, because it just seems like a button that you press and yeah, it's a new playstyle and it's like a new ability and it functions differently, and that's cool, and I think that's great and exciting. But at the same time, if it doesn't fit in with the rest of our kit, it just seems a little odd. They did a great job initially of making Icy Propulsion work with Glacial Spike by reducing Icy Veins by 5 seconds, I think it was, or 3 seconds, or whatever it was. But I do wish that this functions with Thermal Void as well, because Thermal Void is frankly baseline at this point. I think having Thermal Void be a talent, for example, is actually a little odd if you think about it, because Frost has not played without Thermal Void, has not played with Thermal Void. Like, it's always been a thing, is what I'm trying to get at, for the longest I can remember. Maybe like 1 or 2 patches that we didn't play it, but it always feels weird when we're not playing it, because it's a core identity. So perhaps baking Thermal Void into our talent is actually into Icy Veins itself might be a good move, and instead just shifting Glacial Spike over here. And then it frees up a different talent point over here, to build something new. Freezing Winds, honestly, while I don't like this talent, I think it functions fine. It's interesting. I do wish it was a little less awkward, but it is what it is. I think one potentially easy fix is to actually make Freezing Winds is the 2-second time, potentially a little shorter, which might be a bit unsynergistic with Glacial Spike if we do want to play Glacial Spike. But having them opposites of each other might be a reason to not have them synergized potentially. The reason I want it to be reduced by a little bit is just so that you can kind of more reliably be pressing Ice Lance in certain situations, right? Instead of being that awkward window where, oh, there's like 0.2 seconds left. Oh, can I cast? No, I have to just cast a Frostbolt and then Flurry afterwards, etc. And that brings me on to my next issue. I thought initially that Flurry was going to be in a place where with this 2-charge system, I thought this rework was fantastic. Big props to Blizzard for reworking Flurry to what it is now. The 2-charge system is amazing, and it's the best thing they did for Frost. And I thought initially that the reason they did this was that it gets rid of this whole munching Fingers of Frost versus versus Flurry, where if you have both of them, let's say you have a Fingers of Frost and you're casting a Frostbolt, you would not want to Flurry. Sorry, you would not want to Ice Lance if you if you have a Flurry already charged up and you're casting Frostbolt and you have a Fingers of Frostproc, you always want to use your Flurry. And so then you're going to waste your Fingers of Frostproc. That just seems weird to me. I don't like that gameplay. They tried to do something with this here where Fingers of Frost Ice Lance deals 20% increased damage to frozen targets, which is targets with Winter's Chill, to kind of alleviate a bit of the pain of the munching. And I think that was a good idea, but I do wish it was still a little less. What I would urge you to do is, if you play Frost right now and you try to prioritize Fingers of Frost over Flurry, it actually feels really nice. But it's a DPS loss, and I think that that's kind of a weird spot to be in. And maybe I'm a minority in thinking that it's nice, but I think that more proc less munch, less frostbolt is typically a good thing for the spec. I think that most people agree with that. Uh, so definitely some way to fix this Fingers of Frost versus Flurry interaction wastage would be nice. Uh, I don't know what solution could be most possible. I'll leave it to them. Someone might say, "Oh well, if you have Winter's Chill and you have Fingers of Frost, maybe it will do double damage. You know, like it will multiply with both." Obviously, that's a big PvP concern and generally just a gameplay health issue concern. You don't want a Frost Mage to be able to one-shot someone with like a double charge Ice Lance. I think the more healthy option is like if you Ice Lance something with Winter's Chill, the Fingers of Frost doesn't get consumed, or the Winter's Chill doesn't get consumed. Both possibilities, right? Moving on, my last like point to talk about is these two here, Cold Front and Fractured Frost. And these points here were specifically designed with the Necrolord Frost Mage gameplay, right, where you're spamming frost bolts. Um, that was what was in mind, I believe. But unfortunately, the reason we wanted to play like that in Shadowlands was because we had Necrolord, and there was like an extra bonus, right, that you were stacking this crazy spell power. We don't have that anymore. And on top of that, Fractured Frost is just worse version of Necrolord form. Not only in the lack of spell power, but also in the actual, like, the number of Frostbolt cleaves we get, because it only goes up to 50%, right? I talent into it here. It only goes up to 50%, not 100. If it was 100, it might be a bit more viable. I think Cold Front's a cool spell and it's a cool ability, and I do wish that it was more viable. Um, yeah, I mean, there's not much more to it. I think some work could be done here. Because frankly, the AoE gameplay of Frost is a little stale. It's not skill expressive enough. It's quite basic, and maybe that's okay. But I do think that it could use a bit of a freshen up, so to speak. It shouldn't just be a straight priority list with basically no other considerations. On that note, I don't know how, but please, Blizzard, fix Freezing Winds bug. If you cast a Frozen Orb while you have a Frozen Orb active already, which happens very, very, very often, Freezing Wind just freaks out and just does not work anymore. It just disappears. Even if you had it remaining, like if you had Frozen Orb out and then you cast another Frozen Orb and the previous Frozen Orb saw it 5 seconds, the Freezing Wind 5 second whatever, it just disappears. Shouldn't work like that. I don't know why it does. I'm sure you know that it shouldn't work like that, and I'm sorry if I'm pointing out the obvious, but it does seem odd that this bug has existed since Legion, and it's quite an integral gameplay loop of Frost. So if you want some gameplay clarity, I think this is definitely something to look at for Frost. Glacial Assault and Comet Storm are largely okay. I think Glacial Assault's actually not as bad as people think. Comet Storm could use a little bit of a buff, but that's more of a numerical tuning thing. I'm not going to talk about that too much. Ray of Frost is fine. I do think it could be a little stronger, potentially making it like cast a little faster, so it's less opportunity cost, right? Or reducing the cooldowns, or even making it not just generate the Fingers of Frost, but also Fingers of Frost and the Flurry. Could be really cool, because I like the idea of Ray of Frost. But yeah, I mean, those are most of my comments. I think everything else seems fine to me. I don't have much more to say. I hope this video has been enjoyable, informative. Uh, oh, I guess I should mention, as for 10.1, my current stance is I think Frost is the spec to play with current tuning. If you pinned me down and told me, hey, pick me a spec right now to play to get ready for 10.1, I think it's going to be Frost. That's what I'm going to be playing, most likely, with current tuning. Hopefully we won't stay with current tuning and things get changed and reworked and worked on for Mage, but yeah. Yeah, that's really all I have to say. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.